It really feels like WWE is taking over in 2025, doesn't it? We've got WWE Raw, Netflix, and if you're like me in Canada, all WWE programming is going over to Netflix. So that's actually kind of a positive. It's all in one place. But there's a lot going on. WWE ID was just announced, and that is just basically more developmental, more expansion for WWE to grab new talent, upcoming talent. So they work at the likes of Cody Rhodes' Nightmare Factory for developmental, or Booker T's, and a bunch of other ones that they're associated with, so that new talent that are coming into wrestling are going to be like branded WWE ID people, and then they could have an opportunity to then get up, level up, maybe go to level up on NXT, or get into WWE's NXT program, and off they go. Good and bad thing. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think about specifically with WWE ID? Is that a good move, or does it hurt the business, hurt the industry as a whole? Because it seems like on one hand, great for talents that are coming in. They go to Cody Rhodes' Nightmare Factory. They start learning literally the ropes of wrestling, and maybe they're going to be associated with WWE loosely, that they're prospects. And in that regard, for those people, that's an awesome opportunity. But I can see the other side of those feeling like, well, it's more monopolization, it's more takeover of WWE, more expansion of them. Remember Triple H when he was originally, he had a PowerPoint presentation and he was doing the whole global localization of NXT? Well, they wanted like NXT Europe, Japan, NXT India. They wanted like all of these NXTs all over the place. And that was the real plan. It seems like over time, everything has kind of pivoted, and it seems more likely that the takeover expansion of WWE is more like, here's the WWE ID program with all these developmental systems all over the place, which they could also do over time, expand those globally, so they can do a WWE ID program in India. The other thing, and I know nothing, but like, I just think that on paper, it seems cheaper. Because if you did Triple H's original plan of NXT everywhere, there's NXTs all over the globe. Seems expensive to run all of that and manage all of it. Versus WWE ID, you can keep everybody doing their thing, and they simply give them their certificate at the end that they're an ID person. And then that way, WWE really doesn't have to run more stuff. They're just getting more of a funnel of talent into their program and into their system. It's good and bad. It is good and bad. Now, other stuff that's happening, and we got to talk about stuff that we need to see as well with WWE in 2025. Because Triple H is just holding that globe, isn't he? He's holding the world by his hands, and he's just spinning around every which way of what he wants done and what he wants to change. But there's still stuff that needs to be done. And with WWE going to Netflix, like we said, it's a big deal. And Raw right now, as we know, is running this thing in like 2 hours. And do you like that? Because for me, I'm torn. On one hand, everything picks up the pace a little bit, but on the other hand, the stuff can't breathe. Stuff just can't breathe, but it's not dragging on. So like, it's quick hits. It's like back in the day, but it's kind of used to the 3-hour format, if I'm going to be honest about it. So with Raw on Netflix, we get unlimited time. They can do whatever they want, likely going back to a 3-hour format. SmackDown is also 3 hours. And this is going to be one of those things, I think, going forward in 2025, the WWE is really going to play with, especially on Netflix, where they can run the hours of like 3 hours and 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 40 minutes, etc. And they can really play with the timelines of the show. But Raw on Netflix, I think, needs to pop a lot and change things up, even from a production standpoint. Make it really stand out and feel different than SmackDown that's on regular television. And I mean, like, change the sets, change the designs, change the theme song once again, and make it more punchy and rock and like retro. I think with Raw on Netflix, you're gonna see few like tweaks, and I think we have been seeing that with Triple H. The production, the Triple H camera is backstage on SmackDown now, where they're just watching him, so it gets him on TV more often. But we're seeing little things here, more blood, a little bit more cursing, loosening things up, a little bit more of the adult themed stories. Things aren't like totally PG anymore, and that's all good in my eyes, because they can go from either end of the spectrum. I don't need a rated R product, but you know, when it calls for it, be more PG-13. If you're gonna have like a hardcore match, Extreme Rules match on Raw when it's on Netflix, maybe make it a little bit more hardcore. Use different weapons. Don't just use kendo sticks. Try some new stuff. But I think we are already seeing a ton of changes happening. There's tweaks and things going on, even on NXT's level. So we talked about WWE ID coming in. and those talents eventually maybe getting called up to NXT. But now we're already seeing NXT talent showing up more often on Monday Night Raw. Last year, when they were doing the call-ups, you would start to see, even before that, like before the draft, you would see Trick Williams, Carmelo Hayes, and others in the crowd. And they still do this. Like, Trick just shows up like every other week on SmackDown and waves to the crowd. They're doing this a little bit more and a little bit more. I think it's a very clever way in order to introduce the larger audience to NXT talent. We're seeing that on the women's tag team side, where you're gonna get Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend, basically called up because they were interacting in the tag division on main roster. I like the difference in approach with this, and I hope they do more of that with NXT. Not just a one-off match where they just show up and then the crowd has to process it, who they are, but if you just have them peppered in the crowd and doing it that way, yeah, they can get involved in promos, storylines, and attack angles, and then boom, they're on the main roster. And as we've seen main roster talent cycle down or across to NXT. And those are good things because you help elevate more of the NXT talent. But NXT as a whole, I think is going to be taking over even more because now we're in the silver and black era of this thing. And I feel like in 2025, that part of WWE is really going to be running on all cylinders where you're going to have a crop, especially in the women's division in NXT, is huge. And I think you're going to see that get expanded more. You're going to see bigger and bigger matches happening on the men's and the women's side especially, and then more talent brought up to main roster. It almost feels like sometimes, I know everyone will hate this, but like, and I don't really want it, but like, you could almost do another WWE show, like a Raw and SmackDown and then a Thursday Night Thunder, something like that. It would be trash, but they have so much talent on this roster, an abundance of riches sometimes, yes? But I do feel like even with WWE doing so much and change and all this stuff in 2025, and like WrestleMania is gonna be The Rock and Roman probably, and the biggest WrestleMania of all time, there's stuff that I feel like needs to be addressed, changed, as they continue to expand and evolve. The one thing is like the match cards. I don't know about you, but roughly five matches on a card, it don't work for me, brother. I don't need 10. I think like what they're doing with Crown Jewel, which I believe was 7 matches on the card, that's a healthy number. If there are feuds that are happening week to week television and they're hot, they should make it onto the PLE, onto the pay-per-view card. You're still doing like, you got as much time as you want on these PLEs. They cut it like right at 3 hours. And that's a healthy time. I like 3 hours, but that 6, 7 matches, that can really work. 5, I feel like is so small. Yes, the positive is you give matches a lot of time to breathe and tell a big story in the ring, and they're trying to like bookend Raw and SmackDown before and after the PLEs so that you're kind of getting a lot more value on TV where you can see a title change or a big blow off for a match in a feud. And that is cool because that makes you want to go and see Raw and SmackDown. The PLEs, it's where all the big angles are supposed to happen. Also, with all of that, you're paying obscene amount of money for these tickets. That's another thing. Have you seen the prices for WrestleMania? It's absolutely absurd. WWE needs, I understand that they're just like, they're raking in hand over fist. Like Triple H is just Scrooge McDuck at this point with how much money they're making, and they're breaking records left and right. But ticket prices are getting absolutely crazy and they cannot keep that up. People are not gonna be able to go to their shows. Like they keep selling out, people are buying it, but man, it is way too crazy. Just tone it down a notch. Like you're all excited, bring it down a notch. You keep selling out everything. And if you're gonna charge them an arm and a leg and a tooth, then maybe give them more freebies, like give them a t-shirt or other things, memorabilia when they go to a show. It's absolutely absurd. They need to change the ticket prices on all these PLEs. It gets way too pricey. But in 2025, I feel like other things need to be done and could be done. Number one, I think it's very likely we get another draft. They did it last year, thought it was good, but they still haven't cracked kind of the formula for what can work for a WWE draft. Got main draft, supplemental draft. I don't know, something needs to change, and I don't like that it was just kind of like all main title holders, you don't move. You eliminate, 10 options there where people are just like, everyone with a belt, you don't move. The fun of the old days of the draft was seeing Cena and Batista swap brands. It was like, oh my God, Batista, SmackDown. What does that look like? It's really cool when that happens. Oh, I get the world title on SmackDown. I get the WWE Championship and Cody on Raw. Those things, it could happen this year, it could happen in 2025 because you're seeing things change a lot with WWE, especially again, going back to Netflix. They're gonna wanna keep that as star-studded as they can. So you might, maybe, you see Cody Rhodes going over with the WWE Championship on Monday Night Raw, and they load that thing up, and then you're gonna move maybe Gunther, if he's world champion, move him to SmackDown. Or what if Punk and Seth pick up the world title and move them to SmackDown? That freshens things up so much. Or keep it Punk and Cody on the main show going for the WWE Championship. I don't know, but you need to be able to swap out the titles more when it comes to a draft and figure out the formula too to really make it hit. Now, you mentioned titles and a little bit of the swapping here. The other thing they got to do in 25, I feel like, to really start expanding the product more and doing better is mid-card titles for the women. This has been talked about for a long time. I know on my channel I've talked about this a ton, and just as a fan, I want to see women's mid-card titles. I think they're long overdue. Sure, right now we are in this weird middle point where it's like, okay, we got a 2-hour block of Raw, SmackDown's gonna go to 3 hours, then Raw is probably gonna go back to 3 hours. So I understand not wanting to do it like right now. It doesn't really work. But come on, night one of Netflix, just Triple H loves doing the reveal. He loves pulling the blankie off of the title belts. Reveal a US and Intercontinental Women's Championship. Do that in January. Then they got stuff to fight for going into WrestleMania, and you have the time. Like, you'll have the hours available, and it's Netflix. You can do anything you want. Triple H can do his favorite thing, which is unveil title and announce tournament in a brawl, all in the same show. But if you get mid-card titles for the women, if WWE wants to expand and do even more next year, I think they need to do a better job of elevating mid-card talent. There's like the lower card, there's the mid-card, and then there's the main event stuff. And one of the issues I have with the product right now is, and we've seen this right now with Rhea Ripley's injury. Rhea's injured, so the story of Rhea and Liv, it's kind of on hold, and we gotta see what's gonna happen there. Is Becky Lynch gonna return and kind of tag into that spot? Who is going to fill the void? The issue I have with WWE right now and their talent pool is not elevating other talent up quick enough. They get so focused on these storylines, these long epic stories of Rhea and Liv, and then Rhea gets legitimately injured, and that sucks, but it feels like you have nobody else ready to even flirt with the world title. While this whole main story has been going on, no other women have been trying to get up to be a #1 contender in storyline. Now, your NXT pool is like filled with talent on the women's side. You could bring in a lot of them to help fill it in, especially when you have 3 hours of TV. But this is where they're failing in my eyes. They do not have enough people elevated. If you got women's mid-card titles, then you've brought them up a notch. You have people that can actually fight over something, and your US champion on the women's side, you're elevating them more so that they can presumably get to the world title scene. SmackDown's a little different, where you have Naomi and Tiffany and Nia and Bayley. Mia Yim is over there. You have more talent that are working in the mix of the WWE Championship. And they do this on the men's side too. Bloodline story, or it's just Cody's story, that's it. Nobody else is doing anything for like the main title. I think WWE next year could really surprise us for what they end up doing. The big sagas are here to stay, which could be good or bad in your eyes, like the Bloodline and Judgment Day. Although they're kind of like, they're having some trouble right now. But in your eyes, what do you think WWE needs to do differently, change, or what do you want to see next year? If you guys want to talk more about Rhea Ripley, for example, and that injury we mentioned, click this video right here. It's going in depth and what could happen. What are the options? How do we fix that whole thing? Have a great day. See ya.